Good morning, scholars, and welcome back to Learning with Previe. Today we're working on Fairy Tales Lesson 6, Hansel and Gretel Part 1. Today's learning goal is I can describe settings, characters, facts, and events in Hansel and Gretel. Here we are. Fairy tales often have a problem that must be solved. Can you think of some of the problems and solutions from the fairy tales we've already heard? So far, we heard Rumpelstiltskin, and some of the problems in Rumpelstiltskin's was spinning straw into gold and needing to know his name. So, the solutions in that story were that Rumpelstiltskin spun the straw and the messenger discovered his name. We also talked about Rapunzel. Some of the problems that were in the story of Rapunzel is the woman wanted Rapunzel from the garden, the lettuce Rapunzel. Rapunzel, the girl, gets locked in the tower in the woods. Rapunzel, the girl, gets locked in the tower and taken into the deep woods, and the prince was blinded. And the solution to that was the husband agrees to give the baby to the witch for Rapunzel, and the prince finds Rapunzel, the girl, and gets his sight back. Okay. In Sleeping Beauty, the problem was the 13th fairy's evil spell. And the solutions was the 12th fairy softened the curse, and the king ordered all the spindles to be burned. And at the end, the prince kisses the princess, and she awakens. So, think about what kind of problem Hansel and Gretel might have. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a walk through these pictures. You can kind of see what's happening in the story. Think about what do you think the problems are that they might be facing. Well, it'll be interesting to find out. You might have already heard the story of Hansel and Gretel, but if you listen carefully, you might find that this version is a little different. Okay. Listen carefully to find out what problem Hansel and Gretel have and how they try to solve this problem. Once upon a time, near a deep, dark forest, there lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. So right here, this is the woodsman right here, and this is his wife talking, and you can see 2 children in the background there. Okay. The boy was named Hansel, and the girl was named Gretel. So here's Hansel. Here, and this is Gretel. The family never had very much to eat, and now, when times were hard, people around the land were starving, and the poor woodcutter could not get enough to feed his family. As he lay in bed one night, tossing and turning with worry, he turned to his wife and said, "What is going to happen to us? How can we feed our poor children when we haven't got enough for ourselves?" How do you think the woodsman and his wife solved the problem of not having enough food to eat? "Listen to me," said his wife. "Early tomorrow morning," the cold-hearted or unkind woman said, "we'll take the children deep into the woods. We'll give each of them a piece of bread and make a fire, and we'll leave them and go about our work. They won't find their way home in time for dinner, and we'll eat their share." "No," said the man, "I cannot do that. I cannot leave my children alone in the woods, where there are wild animals, where it will get dark and cold as the sun sets." "Then you are a fool," snapped the woman. "You might as well accept that we will all starve." Then she nagged the poor man and scolded him and kept at him until at last he agreed. "But I feel sorry for my poor children," he said quietly. The two children were so hungry that they had not been able to sleep. So they heard everything their stepmother said to their father. Gretel cried, but Hansel whispered, "Don't worry, I'll think of something." And when their parents had gone to sleep, Hansel got up, put on his little coat, and sneaked outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles that lay in front of the house glittered like silver coins. The pebbles sparkled. Hansel stooped and filled the pockets of his coat with as many pebbles as it would hold. Then he tiptoed back to bed and said to Gretel, "Go to sleep, little sister." Why do you think Hansel was gathering pebbles? At daybreak, the woman came and woke up the two children. Daybreak is when it first becomes light in the morning. "Get up, you lazy bones. We're going to the forest to get some wood." So she gave them each a piece of bread and said, "That's your food for the day. Don't eat it all at once, because it's all you're going to get. We will have supper after we return from the wood. That is, if you're home on time." Do you think they will be home on time for supper or dinner? Gretel carried both pieces of bread in her apron, for Hansel's pockets were full of pebbles. They all started out on their way to the forest. As they walked, Hansel kept turning and looking back at the house again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you looking at? You must watch where you're going." "Oh," said Hansel, "I'm just looking at my little white kitten sitting on the roof of the house to say goodbye." Do you think Hansel was really looking at his kitten? Why did he say this? The wife said, "You little fool, that's not your kitten. It's just the sun shining on the chimney. Now come along." But Hansel stayed a few steps behind. He kept turning, and each time he turned, he dropped a pebble from his pocket to mark the way. When they were deep in the forest, the father said, "Gather some firewood, children. I'll start a fire so you won't get cold while we work." Hansel and Gretel gathered a little mountain of twigs and sticks. And then when the fire was burning, the wife said, "Stay by the fire, you two. We have to go and cut wood. And when we're finished, we'll come back and get you." Are they coming back? So Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. After a time, they ate their bread. And after a longer time, they got so tired they closed their eyes and fell asleep. When they woke, it was dark, and they were all alone. Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. Hansel tried to make her feel better. "Wait a little until the moon rises," he said. When the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which glittered like silver coins, and showed them the way. They walked on through the night, and at last, at the break of day, they came to their father's house. They knocked on the door, and when the woman opened it, she was shocked. She was very surprised to see Hansel and Gretel. But all she said was, "Why, there you are. Why did you stay so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming home again." Why do you think she would say this? Of course, their father was glad to see them, for it had broken his heart to leave them alone. Not very long afterwards, some times were hard again. and there was a little food to eat. Again the children heard their stepmother say to their father one night, "There's nothing left but half a loaf of bread. After that, we're done. We don't have enough food for ourselves and the children. This time we'll take them so deep in the forest that they won't find their way back for a week." "But wife," said the man with a heavy heart, "it would be better to share a last bite of food with the children." But the wife would not listen to him, and she knew that if she kept at him, she could get him to give in and agree to her plan as he did before. Much later, when their parents were asleep, Hansel got up to collect pebbles, just as he did before, but he couldn't get out. His stepmother had figured out how they found their way home last time, and had locked the door. So Hansel got back into bed and tried to think of a different plan. What do you think Hansel's plan will be? Early the next morning, the woman roused the children out of bed. She gave them a piece of bread, even smaller than before. As they walked into the woods, Hansel broke up the bread in his pocket, and every once in a while he stopped to throw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel," said his father, "what do you keep stopping and looking back for?" "I'm looking at a little pigeon that's sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Little fool," said the wife. "Do you think he's really looking at a pigeon? Why is he saying this?" "That's not a pigeon. It's only the sun shining on the chimney." So they walked on, and Hansel dropped breadcrumbs along the way. The woman led the children deeper into the forest than they had ever been in all their lives. Again they gathered sticks for a fire, and the woman said, "Sit there, children, and when you are tired, go to sleep. We're going to cut wood, and when we're finished, we'll come back and get you." Later, when it was lunchtime, Gretel shared her small piece of bread with Hansel, because he had left his in crumbs along the path. Then they fell asleep. As evening came, no one came to get them. When they woke, it was dark, and they were alone. When the moon rose, they started for home, but they could not find the breadcrumbs. The bird had eaten them up. "Come, Gretel," said Hansel. "I know we can find our way." But they couldn't find it. They went on all night, and the next day from morning till evening, but they could not find their way out of the forest. They were terribly hungry, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries. When they were so tired that they could drag themselves no further, they lay down under the tree and fell asleep. What do you think's going to happen next? You're going to hear the rest of this fairy tale tomorrow. So what problems do Hansel and Gretel have in the story? We can go to this page here. I'm having some problems with my snipping tool, so I had to take a copy of the Frog Prince and change it to be Hansel and Gretel. What problems are they experiencing? I'm going to go ahead and put this here in the problems box right now. So, the father and the stepmother left them in the woods. Right? That's the first part of the problem. They don't have any food to eat. And now they're lost, right? So they get lost. So the father and the stepmother left them in the woods. They have no food to eat. They get lost. You're not expected to be able to read everything I write, because you're still learning to decode words, but you might be able to read most of them. So why does the woodcutter and his wife plan to leave Hansel and Gretel in the woods? They don't have enough to eat food for all of them to eat. And they are afraid and they are very selfish. So what does Hansel do when he hears the plan to leave him and Gretel in the woods? The first time, he gathered the pebbles and then he drops them to mark his way back home. At first, does Hansel's plan for solving the problem of being left in the woods work? Yes. So we can actually put that in our solutions. Actually, this is going to be here. So, gathered the stones. Now I'm just going to put leaves, stones as a path. That worked the first time. So it did work because they were able to find those pebbles, right? That glitter in the moonlight on their way home. How does the stepmother feel when she sees Hansel and Gretel return? She was very surprised or shocked to see them. What does she do the next time she plans to leave them in the woods? She locks the door that night so Hansel can't collect pebbles again. So what is Hansel's plan the next time he hears that he and Gretel are going to be left deep in the woods? He drops the crumbs of the bread to mark the way home. Does his plan for solving the problem of being left in the woods work this time? No. Why not? Because the birds ate the crumbs. How would you describe Hansel? I think he's very clever or smart. He thinks of a lot of ways instead of getting upset. He's also very brave. Yeah. Let's see. I think he's very caring too because he wants to take care of his little sister. I bet a lot of you would do that. Okay. In the read aloud, you heard Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. Say the word comforted. If you've ever been comforted by someone, if you have ever been comforted, someone has tried to make you feel better when you were sad or upset. My mother comforted me when my best friend moved away. I'm going to ask some questions. I want you to think about how you could answer these questions and maybe go ahead and talk to mom or dad or whoever's at home with you today. And talk about a time that you can remember if you have ever been comforted by a friend. I was comforted by a friend when I cut my finger. Have you ever comforted a friend? Have you ever made your friend feel better? Most of you probably have. Have you ever been comforted by somebody in your family? Does mom and dad give you a hug if you hurt yourself or you're scared or lonely? Have you ever comforted somebody in your family? Have you ever picked up baby brother or sister and rocked them because they were crying or tried to play with them because they were sad? I'll bet some of you have. Have you ever been comforted by a teacher? I want you to remember the setting. Right here it says setting. The setting of a story is a time and a place that the story takes place. So fairy tales usually begin in a special way that gives a clue about when a fairy tale takes place. Listen carefully while I reread the first sentence of Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, near a deep, dark forest where there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife and 2 children. Did you hear any words that were often used at the beginning of fairy tales? Yes, right here. So we have the where and when. So the beginning of fairy tales often begin with once upon a time. And we said that means a long time ago. Okay? So once upon a time or a long time ago is when. When. We also have to talk about the where. Where does this story take place? This takes place, this story, the where, the setting, the where. Um, it's a deep, dark forest. Even that sounds kind of spooky, right? All right, let's think about some of the characters that we're seeing in this story of Hansel and Gretel. Let's go back to the very first page that show us our characters. Here they are. This is the woodcutter and the stepmother, or the wife. And then I think that's Hansel and Gretel back here. Let's see, did you see any other characters in this? The story is mostly about, there they are, again, the woodcutter and his wife, and Hansel and Gretel. I'm not seeing any other characters, so we're going to go ahead and type that in. So, are any of these characters in this story royalty? Is a woodcutter royalty? No. Woodcutter, wife, Hansel, and Gretel. Those are our real characters in this story. Okay. So many fairy tales do have royal characters, but the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel doesn't seem to have any. So, has there been any magic in the first part of Hansel and Gretel? No. And many fairy tales have some kind of magic or fantasy, but this element has not been used in this story yet. So, we don't have any magical characters right now. We don't have any fantasy. All of this stuff is realistic fiction right now. So we're not really seeing any of those elements that we normally would see. I guess a fairy tale can be a fairy tale without them. Um, so far we see that the father and the stepmother want to lose Hansel and Gretel in the woods because they don't have enough food for the family. And Hansel, he at first solves the first problem by dropping pebbles, but the second time it's not successful. So we're gonna fill in the rest of this chart after we finish this story, which will be tomorrow. All right. Do you know what it means to be a hero? A hero is a brave or a good man or a boy, and a heroine is a brave and a good woman or a girl. So someone who is heroic is a very brave person, or daring or good. So right here, I think I'm going to make it a little bigger. I'm going to write right here. this word hero. No, I don't want it to be capitalized. Hero. And heroine. Remember, a heroine is a brave female. Why does it keep doing that? And down here, I'm going to write heroic. That's a describing word used to describe a person who could be either a hero or a heroine. Okay? I want you to look at these words and see what all of these words, hero, heroine, and heroic, have in common. So right here, I don't know if I can do it, but they all have this hero in it. Do you see hero, heroine, and heroic? Right here, we're going to underline the hero portion. So they all have that base or root word, hero, in it. And these words all refer to people or actions that are brave and daring and good. So someone who is evil is very bad or wicked or mean. Evil is the opposite or the antonym of heroic. So what I would like you to do today is think about some of the characters that we've seen in our stories. Let's see. Let's go back through some of our pictures and see if we can come up with some examples. I'm going to look here. So this is the Princess and the Frog. Think about the characters you've seen in these different stories. Think about one who you think might be heroic, like the prince in this story was heroic. And then if we can think about who the evil character, like maybe this queen was, okay? And what I'd like to do is take a sheet of paper and fold it in half. And on one side, you're going to write heroic, this word right here. I'm gonna highlight the word for you. So you can, heroic on one side. And then on the other side, I want you to write evil. Okay? You don't have to put it in red. I just put so you know which ones I want you to write. And under the one that says heroic, I would like you to take your favorite heroic character that you've seen in these stories and draw a picture of heroic and try to label your picture. You could even write a sentence at the bottom of it to say, you know, who your character is and why they're heroic. And on the other side, I want you to write evil, and I want you to draw your favorite evil character, okay? And give me a sentence or two about this evil character. And then you can take a picture of that and post it on Class Dojo for me. That would be awesome. So our learning goal for today was I can describe settings, characters, facts, and events in Hansel and Gretel. You're not going to have everything you need to do this until tomorrow, so we can see the other half of the story. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great day.